Hi everyone, I'm Becky Rares, your moderator, and this presentation is Sakai Rubrics, and it'll be presented by Wilma Hodges and Earl Nitzel. Wilma Hodges is the Director of Training and E-Learning Initiatives at Longsight, an Apereo Fellow, and the Sakai PMC Community Coordinator. Earl Nitzel is a Sakai and Apereo Fellow and serves on the Sakai core team, and he is also the Senior Software Engineer at Longsight. Please note you're all muted. If you would like to speak up or ask a question, you'll need to unmute yourself. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box. You can enter questions at any time. We'll either address them during the session or at the end. This session is being recorded and will be available later on the Sakai YouTube channel. If you have any problems with the video or audio, also enter a comment in the chat box. Here are Wilma and Earl with Sakai Rubrics.
Hi everybody, welcome. And we're going to be talking to you today about a brand new tool in Sakai 19, which is Sakai Rubrics. So we have a few slides that I'm going to go through, and then we're going to go into a live demo so you can actually see what it looks like. So Earl, I'm going to let you kind of talk over the first few slides since you created them. So just tell me when to advance.
Thanks, Wilma. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so before we jump into the demo, the concept here is just to give you, obviously the what, why, and how about rubrics, right? And, for the first thing is, what is a rubric, and, rubrics are used primarily to It divides the assigned work into component. I don't want to read all that, to be honest. It's basically... It helps
standardize your scoring. So a lot of folks will use it for written assignments or things that are not like, they're hard to quantify into like a numerical grading scheme. So it helps kind of keep you a little more consistent from student to student.
Yes, yeah, that is exactly one of the benefits of using rubrics. And we'll just go on to the next slide. How about that?
Okay.
Because that slide is really boring. I really couldn't, But anyway, so the big reason is why we would want to use rubrics. And that's kind of going into what Wilma was just discussing, right? And a rubric is used to assess performance, right? That's its overall. The overall goal or the overall thing that rubrics do is they assess a student's performance. But they do it in such a way as to give, where they provide grading consistency. This is especially true in multiple grader situations. Either, you have multiple instructors or multiple TAs, however it may be. It really adds consistency for those graders. And that's important, right? I mean, that's super important for classrooms. The other thing is, so some of the other things, it adds clarity to the grading process by spelling out what is graded, right? So all of the criterion represent what is being graded, what the grade is about, right, for that particular criteria. And so, students are able to see, why sort of why they received the grade that they received, right? And so that's very, very important. So it's, it also communicates that. Another thing that rubrics can provide is, it can identify strengths, weaknesses within a group. And, for example, let's say that there are some, maybe some aspect about some particular assignment or something that maybe the students didn't fully grasp in maybe a lecture or something that had happened previously. And so, the instructor can kind of see if there's let's say a dip in a particular criterion, that maybe a lot of the students did struggle with that criterion, right? And so, that's really helpful for the the instructor of the class to kind of receive that feedback without actually having to, ask people or poll people, right? So that's I think that's really helpful for instructors. Rubrics are very versatile. So there's the versatility component to all this that, instructors, you can basically grade anything using a rubric, which that's really what makes them versatile. They can be applied to just about anything. I did kind of mention this already, but, students get, the feedback, right? Because they can, if they're allowed to see the rubric and how the grade was, and how they scored on each criterion, that provides them with, important information. And above all, rubrics serve in many ways as a communication tool, right? Based on the performance that the person who's being evaluated, had done. And so that's, that's in the end, that's one of the ways it does. It really communicates, the performance of that particular student. So let's move on. So, how are rubrics designed, or how are they used? This is just an example. Rubrics can be designed or created in many different ways. The one that's depicted here is just I would say probably the more common way of doing it. But there are others, and you shouldn't restrict yourself to something like this. But typically rubrics have obviously two axes. We have an axis that contains all the criteria, and then we have the other axis, which is the level of performance, or basically how well they scored for that. And then in the center, we have, obviously all the squares, or the intersections between, the performance and the particular criterion. You can put in, it's a very good idea to fill in these squares to say, to give an accurate, detailed depiction of what, what it meant, like what they had to do to achieve, or the requirements that were needed to achieve that rating, right? And so that's really what, the center is. Again, it's not all rubrics have to follow this particular design, but most probably will.
Sorry, I didn't mean to advance too fast. Are you?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
No, that's okay. So that was just a brief goal of like the what, why, and how about rubrics, right? Why we would want to use them. For example, why the tool was developed, right? That kind of goes over that. And then, so now we have a couple of slides just on sort of how the project came to be. It was
so this started off as a farm project back in 2016. There'd been a desire for a Sakai native tool, not necessarily a third party, because a lot of folks do use third party tools like iRubric, but there's additional cost to license another application, and then there was additional issues with integrating it, make sure it stays up to date with each version. So having something that was within the LMS was something that people had wanted for a while, but it was sort of kind of in isolated pockets, and nobody, because it's a big project, nobody really had stepped forward to say, hey, we'll fund this. So we started it as a farm project to get folks to collaborate on it and pool resources toward development of rubrics. And we were successful in getting several different institutions and organizations to contribute. Unicon actually ended up doing some of the preliminary work on building the Gradebook, or I'm sorry, building the Rubric Manager service as a tool. And then Longsight did some work on, you know, kind of making that work within the Sakai core framework. We also had some work done with by EDF to implement some of the updates and changes, and so and this is not an exclusive list. Other folks have helped, but just to kind of show you that it was really truly a community effort. A lot of different folks were involved in the development of rubrics. And it is in Sakai 19. It's a brand new tool. So it will be something that you've not seen before, and we're going to actually take a look at it in just a little bit. But it is integrated with the assignment tool, the Gradebook tool, Samigo, and forums. So you can use it in any of those places within Sakai where you have items that you might be grading using a rubric. So I'm going to take you into a live demo, and this is just sort of a preview of coming attractions. This is what I'm going to walk through. So first we'll go in and we'll create a rubric, and then we'll attach it to an assignment. We'll grade an assignment using the rubric so you can see how it scores. And then I'll give a quick preview of what it looks like in the Gradebook, in forums, and in tests and quizzes. So this isn't, you know, we have a short amount of time, so it's not a full-fledged like training session, but at least you can see the tool in action and imagine how you can use it when it's live in your instance. So I'm going to switch over here. This is on Trunk Master, so hopefully all goes well. This isn't the 19 branch, this is 20, because I wasn't sure if all the latest was in 20. So you'll see that there's a new tool. So it may not be activated by default. So oops. If you are going into a brand new site that's not used it before, you may need to select it here to add it as an active tool in the course. So once you've added the rubric manager, this is what it looks like, and you can create set rubrics or you can share rubrics among you know, other sites. So the rubrics are tied to the site as opposed to being tied to a user, because you might have several people. In a lot of cases you might have, like, you know, multiple faculty team teaching a course, and we wanted all the faculty to have equal ability to access those rubrics that are tied to particular items within a course. So when you add a new rubric, I'm just going to call this my essay rubric. You can change, you know, the title, obviously, and then it gives you a couple rows of criteria as sort of a starting point. But you don't have to use these necessarily, or you could, you know, change them up so as to use different ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this one across the top here, and because I like this one a little bit better, that goes to 20 points. So if I want to edit the title there, I'm going to say content, and you can put additional description. I'm not really going to fill it out in depth, but a lot of people get very detailed on their rubrics, and you can certainly do that. All of these levels and criteria give you the ability to add descriptions. So if you want to change any of these, you can. I'm going to start it off actually on 5, just to give people points for trying. And then we'll go to, I don't know, we'll go to 10. 15. 20. And up to 25 points for this criteria. So now, since I like my point spread, I might want to just copy this so I can actually clone these, and that way I don't have to make those adjustments multiple times. So I can just change the type of criteria. So maybe this is, let's see, tone, and I'm going to take that out because I don't really want that in there. And let's see, so that gives me 50 points. So I want, let's say it's a 100-point rubric, because my points here are going to map to the points of the assignment. So let's see, we'll do mechanics, and we'll do sources. So those are my 3 different areas of criteria, and I can adjust these independently if I want. I could add new ratings in between if I needed to. You don't have to have them all have the same number, although some people prefer that they do. So that's just a personal choice. And once you have a rubric, incidentally, you can clone it or you can share it. So cloning it just makes a copy of it. Sharing it makes it available to anybody else at the institution, and then they could then copy it into their courses. So one thing to note is that once you're using a rubric in an assignment or other item you've attached it to, you can't change it because it's, you know, sort of locked at that point, because there might be grades associated with it. So, okay, so here's my essay rubric that I have all set, and I'm going to go into an assignment and attach it to this assignment 1 that I have here. So I'm going to go in and edit this assignment, and it's in the grading area. So if you kind of scroll down in the settings, you'll see where you can put your point values and such. So what I'm going to do is I am going to actually add it to the gradebook, and I do want to use a rubric. So if I have more than one, and you probably will, if you use rubrics, you'll probably have a collection of them. You'll see them in the drop-down menu here, and I see the one that I just created. If I want to preview that, I can pull it up to see what it's all about, because maybe I have a few and I don't remember which is which. So I can look at it to see if I like that one. And then I have a few different options here. I could hide it from the student if I wanted to, although most people don't. They want students to know what they're being, you know, assessed on. So the rubric is helpful in communicating those requirements. There's also the ability to adjust individual scores, and that lets you kind of fine-tune if there's a criteria that is worth 25 points, but you think somebody only earned 24 out of 25, you could tweak their grade. That's what that is about, and it's just on the individual student. It doesn't allow you to adjust the overall rubric. You have to do that from the rubric manager. So those are the 2 items that are kind of associated with the setup of the rubric. So now I'm going to go ahead and post that. And that saved it. And now that I have a rubric associated, you'll see it has the little rubric icon next to it to let me know at a glance, hey, I could grade this with my rubric. So I can tell right from this screen. So if I go into grade, now I don't have any student submissions per se, but I'm going to go ahead and go into the grading workflow just so you can see where the rubric would show up. So when you go into grade a student submission, typically you get the student submission here. You get their attachments or any inline content that they submitted. The grading rubric is on a tab right next to that. So you can review the student's content and then click over to view the rubric. And the great thing about these are you just click, click, click. And depending, you know, where you think they fall, you could click whatever boxes are, you know, the best assessment of their work, and you'll see that it totaled up the points for me over here on the side, and it totaled it out of 80, and it put that number down here into the grade area. So when I save it, this grade is actually going to go to the gradebook. So it tallies those points up for me. Now I can put some additional comments if I needed to, if I wanted to explain my selection of a particular rating. It gives you that flexibility. These comments are separate from the ones down here at the bottom. So these comments only show up within the rubric when the student views it. Student will be able to see their graded rubric when they go in to view the assignment feedback on the assignment. So once I've made those changes, I can save and release or save and don't release, depending on whether or not I want to let students see those scores. So that's kind of how it works in the assignment tool. Now I'm going to flip over to forums, because it's the next one alphabetically. And I'm going to go, and I was actually in the process of setting up a new topic, just so I'd have something easy to attach an item to. So once you have a topic, and you could do it at the forum level as well, it depends on where you wanted to use that rubric, you can go into the settings here, and if you are grading, you can tell it, okay, well, I'm gonna grade it, and I want to use a rubric for that forum. So it actually lets you, just like in the assignment area, select the rubric that you want to use. You can preview it if you need to. You have those two other options should you need them, and then you can go ahead and save. And once you do that, you'll see that the rubric icon shows up next to your topic to let you know that that there's a rubric associated with that. The grading is similar. It comes up in the post view in the grading screen. I don't have any messages here, unfortunately, to show you, but it's a similar clickable interface that sends the score over to the gradebook.
Hi, Wilma. We have a few questions. Do you
Okay.
want to wait, or do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pause for a few questions before I go on to the other two tools. So where should I start? Because
there was 3 from Tonko at 144.
Okay, let's see. 3 small questions. Need to allow for rubrics to be used in peer evaluation assignments for the peer evaluators and not only the instructor. So you want it included in like the peer evaluation workflow in the student assignment? I'm assuming that's what that means. That would be a great next step, I would think. So that's definitely something that has been discussed. It's not currently in the current assignment tool, but that is definitely something that I think people would want.
Yeah, it's probably, Wilma, I'll just
go ahead
on that real quick. It's probably not there by default, and the reason being is because you know, with peer evaluations, you're going to have many, many, many more evaluations. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but you could say the first iteration of this tool is really to give, you know, it's grading, you know, from a you know, from the perspective of you know, the instructor or the grader to the student, and not so not student to student. That's probably why that's why that's not on there now. It's probably a good future enhancement for it, though.
Yeah, and I'm seeing another one that sounds like another interesting enhancement idea for the future is to allow for multiple graders to use a rubric for one item. I'm assuming what you mean here is like if there's, let's say, 3 TAs grading something, you want to normalize the grading to make sure they're all kind of grading is at the same difficulty level, that you could have saved more than one rubric for that item. We don't currently have that right now. It's just, you know, the instructor makes a change, and whichever instructor it is, it doesn't matter. It's still a change that's made to the grade, and that's it. But that might be something that could be considered down the road as an enhancement. Let's see, I see a third one. Will rubrics allow for insight not only on final rubric grade level only, but also statistics on criterion level for reliability, validity, inter-rater reliability? Yes, we do want to incorporate some more reporting and being able to kind of get sort of a bird's eye view of how students are performing with respect to the various criteria. That is definitely not in this phase. So this is sort of the minimum, you know, being able to use it, being able to attach it to things. The reporting piece it gets more into analytics, and that is certainly something that we had in mind, but it was beyond the scope of this project. Earl, did you want to add anything there?
Not at this time. I think you covered them.
Okay, so let's see. Becky, what's the next question?
The next one's at 149 by Jennifer.
Okay.
Can you upload an existing rubric to the manager?
No, I believe you have to create them in here. So if you have a rubric that you typically use, you would want to just recreate it basically in the rubric manager. However, if you do have one that you want to share with a different course, you can share it. And once it's here, then anybody at the on that instance, anybody at your institution would be able to copy it into their site. So you don't really need to export it unless it's something you're creating from scratch.
Okay, there's another one you might have to look at because it's long. It's at 150 by Tonko.
All right, 150.
Would it be possible to make the rubric as percentages so the assignment points will be steered by the rubric, but you don't need to create a new rubric for similar assignments with different point values?
Right, yeah, we've talked about the need to scale the points, and that there's a JIRA out there related to that. That was, again, not included in this first phase, but we've already kind of recognized the need for that. So that is something that will hopefully be addressed.
And then at 152, Shireen asked, does the rubric work with peer review and assignments?
Not currently, no.
And then I think someone already answered this question at 153. Can students see the rubric when they see the assignment? And that's an option that you can decide on, correct, as the instructor?
Yes, yes. As the instructor, you can decide if you want students to view it, but the default is to let them view it. So when a student goes in through the submission workflow, they would actually see the rubric before they submit.
I think that's it right now.
Okay. All right, cool. So feel free to stop me as I go if other ones come up. And if you think of something, type it into the chat and we'll try to catch it. So let's see, I did forums, I did assignments. The other two places where you can use rubrics is Gradebook and Tests and Quizzes. So let me just show you in Gradebook. In Gradebook, if you create an item in the Gradebook, you can attach a rubric to it. So this is an item that I created directly in the Gradebook. It's not coming from another tool. And when you go into either create or edit the item details, you'll see that you have this grading rubric option now. So this will show up if you have any rubrics in your course. If you don't, it just gives you a message saying that you don't have any rubrics yet. But if you do have rubrics, you can select which one you want to do. And you'll notice that this interface here is very consistent. That's because it's calling that same service. So it's actually, all these tools are talking to the rubric service to display this little piece of code here. So that helps to kind of build consistency and efficiency across the platform. And so once you've selected your rubric, you can save it here. And when I want to go in and grade then for an individual student, I would go here to grade rubric and it comes up in a little modal window. So you can again click to select and you've still got your comment if you need it, it's optional, and then you can save your rubric here. So it's attached to the item. If you look at that student's scores here, you'll see a little icon here with the rubric if you want to review something. And this is also what the student would see. They would see the graded rubric and their scores over here, how they add up. So that's what it looks like when you go back to view a graded item. And then the final place that you can use rubrics is in Tests and Quizzes. That's Samigo. You can attach it to an individual question. So you don't attach it at the quiz or assessment level, you attach it to questions, because the idea is that typically people would be grading maybe the essay style questions with a rubric. That's the one that seems to make the most sense for that type of grading. So when you go into edit that individual question, you get the option to use a rubric with it. And if you do that, you can go ahead and save. And you'll see that the rubric icon shows up here when you look at the question in the list. And then let me go ahead and just well, actually, I don't have any submitted assessments, so I can't go into the grading workflow. But it's the same as what you would see in the other areas where it comes up as a box of clickable cells, and then you can highlight the items that you need as you grade it. You would probably go into the grade one at a time workflow in tests and quizzes to get to it there. So, so those are the 4 places right now that you can use it, and I am happy to take other questions.
Wilma, someone asked, maybe you need to go back to the rubrics tool again. They asked, when you share the rubric, does that mean that anyone can use it, or is it shared like a specific rubric can be shared maybe with a specific instructor, like question pools?
Currently, it's shared for anyone. There is an existing JIRA out there for more control over sharing. And I don't recall the number. I remember that was an item that came up in some of the UX testing that we did around rubrics, that people wanted to be able to share with certain people or limit the sharing. But this is sort of the first iteration of it. So hopefully as we go forward, we can add those refinements and give you more control. Right now it's shared for everybody, but it does tell you which site it's coming from, so you know which course it's coming from, and it shows you the name of the author, the person that created it. So at least you have an idea of where that rubric came from if there's more than one with the same name or a similar name.
And there was another question related to that, and then I'll go back to another one. Does sharing allow for a collective edit of the rubric, or is it like a copy of the original?
It's always a copy. So you can't actually change the shared rubrics. If you preview them, you'll see they're sort of read-only. You have to actually copy it into your site before you can edit it. And once you do that, it makes a separate copy of the rubric so that any changes you make don't make any impact on the original. That way the original kind of stays pristine. And then also keep in mind that if you're using a rubric, like this one here has the little lock symbol, that's because I'm using it in a few different places. It's going to lock the rubric once it's been associated with a graded item, because you might have student scores associated there. So if you wanted to make changes to something that's already associated, you would probably first want to clone it or make a copy of it locally, and then make your changes in the new copy so that you always kind of have an original to go back to.
Okay, we've still got about 3 minutes. There was another question, which I think we know why. This is, why is the student content option in lessons using a different rubric? And it'd be nice if they use the same tool. I'm going to guess that's because the student content rubric was created first.
Yeah, that one was created separately. Ideally, yes, we would want to use the same rubric engine for any place that rubrics appear. It's quite likely that if lessons sees some redesign and updating, that there will be changes made to the way rubrics work there.
And then there was a question, do rubrics copy from site to site via import from site and site info? And I'm going to guess there's a new JIRA open for that too?
There is a JIRA open for that. Currently they don't. You have to copy them from the shared area, but we have a JIRA out there to make sure that they're all duplicated at the same time so that you don't have to go and duplicate from here. It's actually not that hard, but when you get a lot of shared rubrics out there, it can get a little confusing. So there is a JIRA out there to address that.
So another question was then, I think you might have just answered it, is it easy to manage shared rubrics? So that's why there's that new JIRA.
It's a little bit of a work in progress. Making the sharing available is the first step, and so refining it, making it a little easier to do and to keep track of is the next phase.
Okay, well, we got about a minute if anybody has anything they want to say.
Earl, you want to add anything?
Nope, no, I don't have anything to add. I'm just happy that Rubrics will be finally in the next release of Sakai.
Yeah, we're really excited about rubrics, and we're excited to make additional changes to them to make them even better. So all of these suggestions are great, and a lot of them have already been suggested and are already out there. But if there's anything new that you think of, feel free to open a JIRA or comment on an existing JIRA. And the more input we get, the more likely it is that those suggestions will make their way into the release. So
All right, it's 2:10, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to the presenters.
Thank you.